We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It's Monday. We're starting another week. We understand the Supreme Court will be coming out with rulings today, maybe already have by the time you hear this podcast. We presume there's going to be a decision on the 14th Amendment thing. I don't see them taking Donald Trump off the ballot, but we'll see what happens. We'll get to that more. We'll talk more about it later. I wanted to pass something on along to you as well. I came across a website that I find very entertaining. You can't sit and watch it very long, but it's nice just to check in now and again. It's called TrumpDebtCounter.com, and it'll give you up to the minute counts on how much Donald Trump owes the state of New York. I mean, it's flipping. It's like a Jerry Lewis telethon chart. It keeps going. Fucking just keeps going. And he's last I checked, it was over $465 million. I'm sure Donnie's checking it every 10 minutes to see what's fucking going on, and it keeps going up like every 10 seconds. Anyhow, check it out. TrumpDebtCounter.com. TrumpDebtCounter.com. It's an entertaining to say the least. Had a pretty laid back weekend. Didn't do a lot. Didn't get to see my granddaughter, so that kind of sucked. But I'm not as tired as I would be had I seen her, so I got that going for me. But we got a big week coming. There's a lot of things happening. Another big story from yesterday. Nikki Haley won a primary in D.C. We'll talk more about that in a bit. But of course, we do have emails. So let's get to the emails. First one goes, Hi, Boomer. Love hearing your podcast and your TikToks. In today's podcast, you said that SCOTUS is going to decide whether TFG has immunity. But the question they have asked the two sides to answer is much narrower than the total immunity. They have asked the lawyers to be prepared to answer whether and to what extent does a former president enjoy presidential immunity from criminal prosecution for conduct alleged to involve official acts during his tenure in office. I'm hoping there'll be some definition on what is an official act and what is not, as well as whether the word alleged belongs in there at all, which many of the TV lawyers have questioned. While in office, a president is somewhat immune from civil prosecution, as I understand it, but there has never been any immunity for criminal prosecution. After they leave office, all bets are off. Nixon knew that, which is why he took the pardon, although he maintained that he'd done nothing wrong. In fact, even Nixon said to Dick Cavett, I believe, if the president did it, it's not illegal. Nice try, Richard, but it didn't fucking work, did it? That was kind of a lighter version of what Donald Trump is trying to say now. Various versions of the TFG lawyers have acknowledged that prosecution is the way to get accountability after he is no longer president. And his own lawyers even said that. You can't impeach him, but you certainly can prosecute him when he's no longer president. They said it themselves. And any lawyer, anyone can get on their show or podcast says the same, except that current idiot who says he has to have been impeached and convicted first, which is absolutely ridiculous. What goes on in Congress has no bearing as to what goes on in the law or in the DOJ. That's just another way to try to create more chaos and make it more convoluted, but it's bullshit. And that's what this emailer says. That's just bullshit, and everyone knows it, even if it's not official lawyerese. Maybe I'm just being nitpicky, but I like to tell the truth. Thanks for listening and talking and telling everyone what is going on. And that comes from Grandma Patty, who is a regular emailer to the program. Now, this next one starts out. It's Sunday morning, and I'm listening to your podcast as I do each morning. And I was one of those people who had doubt about Trump winning the election. And I appreciate you explaining it to me. And I'm not worried at all about the election because you're right. The Republican Party hasn't done anything for the American people. And I'm so surprised that there are still some people who refuse to vote because I talk to people daily asking people to get out and vote. And I do run across Trump supporters and I ask them what he has done to make their life easier. And then I asked them how many hats, shirts, or sneakers has President Biden sold and are continuing to ask for money. And those truly diehard supporters say, I don't talk about politics and walk away. Mike, thanks again for all you do to keep us informed. John, yeah, that's the new thing I'm hearing now. I knew a lot of rabid Trump humpers in the early days of this presidency with Donald Trump and just afterwards. And they were adamant. They wanted to debate and they thought they knew everything. But now when I go back to those folks, they go, I'm really not paying attention to politics anymore. I'm focusing on my business or my family or whatever. This is a way they say, I know I'm wrong. And I just don't want to talk about it. I don't want to admit that I'm wrong. So you're going to get a lot of that, and you'll get some people that just continue to double and triple down. Some people can never be fixed. They are broken beyond all repair. As the military used to say, FUBAR, fucked up beyond all repair. All right, the next one comes from Don in Dallas. Mike, you went on a bit of a rant on Sunday. That's okay with me. You have said many times that you don't think Trump will be the Republican nominee. I don't see how not. He has won every primary so far, and I suspect he'll win Super Tuesday. I don't understand how he's winning, so I think he will be the nominee, but I think he will lose to Biden. I'm sure, hope he will lose. Cheers. Don in Dallas, Texas. Well, you're looking at from the normal sense. Who's winning the primaries? You asked why he's winning the primaries? Because the Republicans have nothing but shitty candidates, and Donald Trump leads a cult, and those people are rabid about him. So, yeah, he'll probably win Super Tuesday. He'll win all the primaries. My point when I say he's not going to be the nominee has nothing to do with how he does in the primaries. There's other extenuating circumstances around Donald Trump. 78-year-old man, not well mentally, not well physically, in mental decline. He's got 91 felony charges. He's getting all his money taken away. He's going on trial, a criminal trial on March 25th. By that time, his money and his property will be gone. That's a lot to put on an old guy. I'm not suggesting that he's going to start losing primaries. He'll keep winning primaries, and I'm cool with that. I expect it, and it really doesn't matter. My point is Donald Trump going to be able to continue on? He's going to implode. He's going to crash. It's going to be too much ultimately. And besides that, when the trial starts on March 25th and maybe goes 2.5 months, we're looking at mid-June when it's over. He will most certainly get convicted, and that will change everything. That will change absolutely everything. We know in the polls that if he gets convicted of a crime, all of a sudden, all the voters shift toward Biden and Donald Trump takes a shit. So there are a lot of extenuating circumstances that come into play here over and above the primaries. If all you're looking at is the primaries, yeah, Donald Trump will win the nomination. But there's a lot more going on here that you have to consider. And that's why I don't think he'll be the nominee. You can't look at this as a normal primary season when the candidate is not normal. We've never seen anybody like this. We've never seen a more prolific criminal running for president. And you have to consider all the things that could happen to him over and above the primaries. So that's why I don't think he'll make it. I think he'll probably win every primary he's in, with the exception of the one yesterday in D.C. But he'll win all or most, and he'll get the delegates necessary to get the nomination. I'm not saying he won't get the nomination. I'm saying he won't make it. He won't be available come the convention time. All right. The next one goes, Mike, longtime listener, first time emailing. Here's a thought that I haven't heard about in a long while. Remember that Trump had all those documents at Mar-a-Lago that ultimately were removed. When that went down, some people speculated that Trump had several documents on Israel's defensive capabilities. and that he, the orange dipshit, had given said documents to his daddy Putin. Some people further speculated that Putin then turned around and gave the documents to Iran, which made sure they found their way into the proper hands. October 7th happened, and the rest is history. What I'm betting on is that the Israeli Special Forces, Mossad, are going to fix a heart attack cocktail for Trump the minute he steps away from the stage. Thanks, New York Dave. Well, Dave, I can do you one better here. We know for a fact that Donald Trump revealed some top secret military information to the Russians he had in the Oval Office shortly after he was elected or inaugurated. He revealed some top secret military information to those Russians in his office, and at least two of those Russians can be identified as Russian spies. Now, when we first heard this, we thought, oh, God, he's releasing American military secrets. But when it finally came down to it, we find out it just happened to be Israeli secrets. Interesting, isn't it? Because at the time, I don't know that people got too worried about it. Oh, Donald Trump's new at this. He didn't know what he was doing. Whoops-a-daisy. And it's Israel, so why do we care? It doesn't really matter. But we know for a fact it was reported when Donald Trump had those Russian spies in the Oval Office shortly after being inaugurated that he did inadvertently on purpose give out some top secret military information, and it had to do with Israel. That in itself should be proof of his criminal behavior. So yeah, we know he did that. And you make a good point about Mossad or any of these other foreign countries, even Russia. If he pisses off Russia somehow, they don't care where the fucking subject is. They'll go after him and they'll put him down. And I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. Donald Trump has a lot of things to worry about. I don't think he even realizes that his very life might be in danger because some of these other countries don't fuck around. They don't fuck around, and he's got some trouble. So, Dave, I think you make a good point, and we'll see what happens. All right, we've gotten some letters from Boris. Boris sent me a letter recently, and he said, I sent a letter off to the Supreme Court after hearing about the immunity case being delayed. And there was no letter with it. So I said, yeah, I didn't see the letter, so please send it to me. So he sent it to me, and I'll read it to you. This is Boris's letter to the Supreme Court after they announced the immunity situation. When I first heard your decision on hearing the presidential immunity case, I was so angry that I decided to hold off writing to avoid being rude and disrespectful. I will never forgive you for not just agreeing with the appellate court's decision, as presidential immunity as a concept is ludicrous. Instead, you added delays to Trump's criminal case. You took a couple of weeks to respond and then added 6 or more weeks to begin deliberations, which makes it probable that the criminal case on January 6th will not be finalized until after the election. We citizens have a right to know the results of this case as well as the documents case before we vote. Also, you have normalized Trump's crimes in the eyes of many American citizens. This concept brings me to how the U.S. Supreme Court's makeup and decisions has divided the people of this once great country over the past quarter century. It happened because of the politicization of the court. It is my humble opinion that in the year 2000, the court had no right taking the Bush v. Gore case to stop the recount of the vote in a state. It was a dirty political game that caused this situation to occur in the first place, and the court just ignored them. A later recount actually resulted in Gore decisively winning. The court's biggest misstep was in January of 2010, when the court legalized bribery in our elections, giving the richest Americans and corporations to have a louder voice than much less affluent majority citizens of this country. This country's democracy was officially murdered, and our government quickly became a free for all. The court became lopsided when the Senate waited nearly 10 months to not consider President Obama's nomination for the court because the Senate decided that it was too close to the presidential election. Yet, when this situation occurred again, it placed the court's newest member 2 weeks before the election. I realize that this last item was not caused by the court. I only say this now because I think that the court needs to immediately begin to remedy this mess. The first thing that must occur is that Justice Thomas must recuse himself due to his wife's involvement in the January 6, 2021 incident. It has an appearance of impropriety. The second thing I think the court must do is to drastically move up the beginning of deliberations. Lastly, that the court must offer an apology to the American citizens for the delays that have occurred on that case to date. I respectfully submit these comments for your consideration. Well, Boris, that's a great letter. You make some great points. And unfortunately, I would say the Supreme Court won't give it any regard at all. Because in spite of the fact the Supreme Court is supposed to work for us, they don't. They work for the wealthy that line their pockets. Now, that may sound like a cynical view, but I think Boris shares, in my opinion, that the proof is in the pudding. We see the justices getting all kinds of favors and all kinds of money and then making decisions that help out their benefactors. And of course, we've got Clarence Thomas, as you pointed out, that should be recusing himself from this immunity case because if Donald Trump gets immunity, that will in turn save his wife because she was in the mix during the January 6th insurrection. So it's natural that Clarence Thomas would do all he can to save his wife, which means he has a conflict of interest, which means he should recuse himself. My question would be this. Of course, there are situations when justices must recuse themselves. That wouldn't be an option if there was never a time they needed to recuse themselves. To Clarence Thomas, if not in this situation, then when? This seems like the epitome of the moment in time when you need to recuse yourself. Still, he will not. It's about arrogance and self-centeredness and self-enrichment, and that's what the justices in the court do. The letter is good, Boris, and I'm glad you sent it. I think we need about 1 million people to send that letter. I think we need to keep talking about it in the narrative. We need to embarrass the Supreme Court at every turn. We need to remind them that we all fucking know and we have a lot of disdain for the way they operate as a Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is a problem. It's impossible to have a full, good, working democracy if our Supreme Court is corrupt. And without question, our Supreme Court is corrupt. I share in your irritation and your concern about the Supreme Court. I think that is one of our biggest problems right now. I've said before, when Democrats get control of Congress and the presidential position, first two things they need to do, they need to codify Roe v. Wade, and they need to fix the Supreme Court in whichever way they can, whether it be through impeachments or stacking the court or whatever has to happen. It needs to be done as soon as possible because we are dealing with a tripod, meaning executive, the legislative, and the legal branch. And one of those legs is not working at all. And frankly, the congressional leg is wobbling. So we're in trouble as a democracy because the system that was laid out for us has been tainted, has been corrupted, has been perverted, and we need to get things back on track. Unfortunately, that will never happen until we get the Republicans out of any kind of power in this country. All right, the next email. Mike, you asked on yesterday's podcast about the point of the Supreme Court ruling on the Colorado case if his name is already on the ballot. And that's what we talked about. We had an emailer said that they had to print the ballots in January. So regardless of what the Supreme Court decides, presumably today, he's already on the ballot. So I didn't understand what the point of this was. Anyway, in the decision by the Colorado Supreme Court, they addressed this. The Colorado Supreme Court said if Trump's name is on the ballot and is ruled ineligible, the Secretary of State of Colorado would be required to not count any of those votes. Hey, I like that. That would be a fix, and that would be interesting. So thank you. That makes me feel better. If the Supreme Court removes him on Monday, we could have a situation where Nikki Haley wins Colorado on Tuesday with a majority of eligible votes cast, but where she only gets like 40% of the ballots. Beyond this, it could potentially remove Trump from the national race, as I don't see how, if he's ruled ineligible by the 14th Amendment in Colorado, he could still be considered eligible in other states. This could also affect down ballot races as well, with cases being brought against the likes of Jim Jordan, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, and the rest. I recently had a conversation with a newer coworker. We normally do not talk politics. I know I'm up more to date than most people, but I was surprised that she hadn't heard about Trump's civil losses. She was shocked when I told her about his fraud. The way I explained it to her, she almost immediately understood it was shady as hell. This is just an example of how messaging can be super beneficial to Democrats. If we can keep the messaging going, there is no way in hell Trump wins. And I agree with you. I don't think he wins under any circumstances. Thank you, Eric. And Eric is our friend from Iowa, very knowledgeable, very articulate guy, and gives me a lot of valuable information, as well as the other listeners that come on the show. And I appreciate that, Eric. It's good to know that if tomorrow or today the Supreme Court says we got to take him off the ballot, then his votes won't count. That's nice to hear. That said, I don't think that's what the court's going to do. They're going to try to find some loophole to keep him on the ballot. I may be wrong about that, but I think that's what most people think at this point. So we'll see what happens. All right. As I was talking about earlier, Nikki Haley had her first and probably her only win in a primary. Nikki Haley on Sunday defeated Donald Trump in the GOP presidential primary in Washington, D.C., her first win against the former president. Now, it's a pretty tiny victory, one Trump almost will certainly use to portray Haley as a creature of the D.C. swamp. D.C.'s 19 delegates will now cast their votes for her at the Republican National Convention in July. That's out of 2,429 delegates so far. Trump has trounced her in all of the other state GOP primaries. Now, right on cue, shortly after Haley's win was mentioned, Trump's campaign said her victory means the swamp has claimed their queen. While Nikki has been soundly rejected throughout the rest of America, she was just crowned queen of the swamp by the lobbyists and D.C. insiders that want to protect the failed status quo. Carolyn Leavitt, press secretary for Trump's campaign, said in a statement, Trump has a total of 244 delegates, and Haley now has 43. Whoever is the first to hit 1215 delegates will be the Republican presidential nominee. Trump is expected to get much closer following this week's Super Tuesday. Yeah, he'll get a lot closer. But the fact is, Haley's win does count for something. For starters, unbelievably, she's now the first woman to ever win a Republican presidential primary. Her ability to defeat Trump in any primary means he can't celebrate a clean sweep, which, as petty as it sounds, it's almost certainly going to infuriate him and delight his critics. And it did. And you'll be interested in his response, which we will get to in just a little bit. It matters for her to win in DC because I think it's going to frustrate Trump more and more. gentleman by the name of Cherry, 66, who was one of the 250 people at the Haley campaign event in D.C. on Friday. She asked to use her first name only. I never hated a politician, but I hate Donald Trump, she said. Oh, it was a woman. I'm sorry. This is America's Hitler. A Haley victory in D.C.'s GOP primary would put our little group on the map, said Dennis Paul, an 84-year-old semi-retired resident. Semi-retired at 84? Please, motherfucker, take a break. She seems to grasp things well, he said. She's obviously good on fiscal policy. She's vibrant and exciting. She's also a woman of color. So I don't know if that's somebody that the Republicans are going to pick as a nominee. The fact of the matter is, this Joe, he's a longtime DC resident, praised Haley for her message of real vigor and understanding of the issues. He said he wants her to stay in the race as long as possible, even though it's unlikely she can win. You know, that's the funny thing about Nikki Haley. She has the good fortune of being compared to maybe one of the worst, dumbest, most criminal politicians in the history of this country. Anybody standing next to Donald Trump is going to look better than Donald Trump. Now, this person at the Haley camp said, first of all, she's not Joe Biden. Secondly, she's not Donald Trump, said Joe, who's in his 60s and who also requested only using his first name, but confirmed his last name is not Biden. Oh, clever. Anywhere she can win and show momentum would be great, Joe said of Haley. Some attendees at Haley's event said that she has come to represent something much bigger than herself. Antonia Ferreira, a former longtime senior aide to the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and the late Senator Orrin Hatch, is now a major donor to Haley's campaign. That's interesting. She said it's clear there is a faction of voters who feel almost voiceless in the Republican Party. She rattled off recently that has deeply frustrated her. Nearly 70% of Americans don't want a Biden-Trump rematch. I keep hearing that quote. I don't know that that's true. Nearly 60% think they're both too old. Well, they are both too old. More than 40% of the voters are registering as independent, tying a record high in 2014. There's a collective scream in this country, said Ferrer, who is currently an executive at the International Republican Institute, a GOP nonprofit that advances democracy. Republicans advancing democracy. Well, there's an oxymoron. Wow. It's like a collective scream for a leader we can be proud of, she said, but the established political class refuses to listen to it because of their own feedback loops or whatever fucking reason, and Haley is giving voice to that. Well, this is actually good news for the Democrats because you should see what's going on here. As much as there's a bitter fight between Haley and Trump is kicking her ass in most cases, there's a big enough faction in the Republican Party that don't want Donald Trump. So that means if Donald Trump ends up being the nominee, he may not get a unified party voting for him. He'll get a bunch of people not voting for him or not voting at all, which makes it virtually impossible for Donald Trump to win the election. At the very least, he needs a huge turnout and every fucking Republican he can get out to vote because there are more Democrats than there are Republicans. And you can bet that the Democrats are going to come out in full force because they're nervous. They're scared about Donald Trump like they were in 2022 and like they were in 2020. That fear hasn't gone away. That disdain for Donald Trump has not gone away. They're just as angry, just as mad. Now we've got overturning Roe v. Wade working in favor of the Democrats. Now we've got Donald Trump losing all his money, being convicted of crimes before the election. This is all going to work against Donald Trump, and there's not one thing that is working for him, that's causing him to gain support or get more votes. There's nothing like that happening. And then you throw in the fact that there's some division within the Republican Party. You have the MAGAs, you have the independents, you have the conservatives. And not everybody in the Republican Party can settle on one person. And it's not like they're going for one person. And if that person loses, well, they'll just vote for the other guy. These people are not going to vote for Donald Trump. They know better. They're tired of the bullshit. So if Donald Trump can't get the entire Republican Party to vote for him and back him, he can't win in November. All right. We are going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Well, because Donald Trump is a deeply insecure, narcissistic motherfucker, you won't be surprised to hear that he didn't react very well to losing to Nikki Haley in the DC primary. Nothing worse for Donald Trump than somebody to tell him he's a loser. Yeah, I know mom and dad told him that all the time, but now as he got older, he has a real fear of being perceived as a loser. And let's just say it's a pretty small win for Nikki Haley, but in this particular instance, he's a fucking loser. He's absolutely a loser. So Trump lost handily to Nikki Haley. The percentage was 63% for Haley and 33% for Donald Trump. He lost by 30 fucking points. And that is just about driving him nuts. Now, apparently the MAGA fucks were just melting down after the beating. Trump's team claimed Haley won because DC is the home of the entrenched swamp. It is also a largely black area, even though Donald Trump says he has all the black folks voting for him. And it's a very liberal area. So there are probably Democrats in there that went and voted for Nikki Haley just to piss off Donald Trump. Now, Trump himself chose to weigh in later, saying on his own social media site, Truth Social, that he purposely stayed away from the DC, Washington, D.C., because it is the swamp with very few delegates and no upside. So that was his answer. Well, I didn't want to win it anyway. I don't care. I don't want to win. Yeah, but he's thinking about it right now. There'll be more tweets or truths or whatever the fuck he calls it, because this is going to get in his brain like a fucking worm and it's going to bug him, especially when the press starts saying, how did you feel losing to Nikki Haley? Oh, he hates being called a loser, even though he is the absolute epitome of the greatest loser in the history of politics. So he went on to say, bird brain. And I don't know where he gets that um, nickname for Nikki Haley. I don't know what covert reason he uses that. I mean, clearly he's suggesting she's dumb. And I'm not saying she's smart, but she's a hell of a lot smarter than Donald Trump. But who isn't? He went on to say Bird Brent spent all of her time, money, and effort there, he said Sunday night. Over the weekend, we won Missouri, Idaho, and Michigan. Big numbers. Complete destruction of a very weak opponent. The really big numbers will come on Super Tuesday. Also, way up on Crooked Joe. No, you're not. Joe's getting 95%, you're getting 60%. That's bad news come the general election. Now, in a follow up post, he said that Bird Brain is a loser, record low performance in virtually every state. Again, not true. He said DeSantis easily beat her in Iowa for a very distant second place, and then she ran up to the podium before he had a chance to do so and claim victory. Sound familiar, Don? Trump said, I enjoy watching the bird disavow her pledge to the RNC and her statement that she would never run against President Trump. A great president. He concluded, well, she ran, she lied, and she lost big, except for DC. She kicked your ass, Donnie. Just saying, she kicked your ass. Okay, today we're supposed to be hearing some rulings from the Supreme Court. And a Supreme Court decision could come today in the case about whether former President Donald Trump can be kicked off the ballot over his efforts to undo his defeat in the 2020 election. I suspect the decision on the 14th Amendment will come today, if it hasn't already. Um, we've got the Colorado primary tomorrow and Super Tuesday tomorrow. So it's a matter of them trying to be as timely as possible. As I stated, Donald Trump is already on the ballot in Colorado, and there's already probably plenty of votes that have come in. Thankfully, Eric told us that if Donald Trump is to be taken off the ballot, then they just wouldn't count his votes. That would be fucking awesome. I hope that happens. But I don't have a lot of hope in the Supreme Court doing the right thing. So we'll see. But here's the thing. If the Supreme Court says, yeah, we're not taking him off the ballot, don't get upset about it. Don't get worried about it. Don't get anxious about it. It's nothing more than we expected. And frankly, it's not the biggest problem that Donald Trump has. If they do take him off the ballot, now there's some issues for Donnie, and Donnie is going to be losing his shit. I just don't think the Supreme Court's going to do it in this case. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't see them doing anything that drastic, especially since they're delaying the time that they're going to hear this immunity case. Now, somebody said they're going to delay the immunity case because they're going to take him off the ballot. That would be nice. I would hope that to be the case. I don't trust too many people, and I definitely do not trust the Supreme Court at this point. Now, of course, Trump is challenging this decision by the Colorado Supreme Court that said he is disqualified from being president again and ineligible for the state's primary, which is tomorrow. The resolution of the case on Monday, a day before Super Tuesday contest in 16 states, would remove uncertainty about whether votes for Trump that the leading Republican candidate for president will ultimately count. Both sides had requested fast work by the court, which heard arguments less than a month ago on February 8th. Now, the Colorado court was the first to invoke a post-Civil War constitutional provision aimed at preventing those who engaged in insurrection from holding office. Trump also has since been barred from primary ballots in Illinois and Maine, although both decisions, along with Colorado's, are on hold pending the outcome of the Supreme Court case. Now, the Supreme Court has until now never ruled on the provision, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. The court indicated Sunday that there will be at least one case decided Monday, adhering to its custom of not saying which one, but it also departed from its usual practice in some respects, heightening the expectation that the Trump ballot case will be handed down. And it just makes sense. That's what's going to happen. Now, except for when the end of the term nears in late June, the court almost always issues decisions on days when the justices are scheduled to take the bench. But the next scheduled court day isn't until March 15th. And apart from during the coronavirus pandemic, when the court was closed, the justices almost always read summaries of their opinions in the courtroom. They won't be there Monday. Any opinions will post on the court's website beginning just after 10 a.m. Eastern Time Monday, today. So if you're listening to this after 10 a.m. Eastern Time, we already know. Separately, the judges last week agreed to hear arguments in late April over the Trump immunity situation, which is absolute bullshit, and which basically shows that the Supreme Court is in the pocket of Donald Trump. Now, this immunity thing is absolutely important because if they do give him immunity, it's going to cause all kinds of problems and would affect most of his cases, criminal cases against him. I know people are worried about that. They're worried that Donald Trump will get immunity. That's not going to happen. They're going to delay like they're delaying, and they're going to give Donald Trump the extra time that he so needs in everything he does. He wants to delay the inevitable. but there's no way they're giving him immunity. That's just too much of a rat's nest if they do it. Not only for Donald Trump, but for Joe Biden and any future presidents. This is just silly to even think that they would give immunity. That's why it's so ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous that they even want to take this up. The only possible reason they want to take it up is so that they can put an end to it, put a cork in it, if you will. This is the final decision. There's no going back. Don't come to us 2 months later from another jurisdiction and do this whole thing over again. That's about the only thing I can think of as to why the Supreme Court is taking this up. There really was no need to. What the appellate court did was pretty much bulletproof, and they should have just said, yeah, that sounds good, let it go. There's only two reasons for them to hear it: to give Donald Trump that extra time, to somehow get involved in this campaign and give Donald Trump the time he thinks he needs to delay these court cases. And the other is what I said. They may just want to finish it off and end this conversation completely, because Donald Trump is bringing it up in other jurisdictions. You remember, he asked his case in Florida to be dismissed because of immunity. Now, just because he doesn't get immunity in this case in D.C. doesn't mean he won't try to bring it up to the Supreme Court again, and then we go through this whole process again. Maybe, just maybe, the Supreme Court is tired of the bullshit too, and they just want to put an end to it. Well, there was some good news for the progressives on the left side. And as people keep pointing out, the young people that are so concerned about Joe Biden's stance on on Israel, they keep saying, tell them to may have a ceasefire, like by Joe Biden say, we want a ceasefire, like that's going to stop Netanyahu. Please, motherfucker, that's not going to help anything. But the progressives should be happy, because Vice President Kamala Harris called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza as Israel's relentless bombardment of the region pushes forward. The threat of Hamas poses to the people of Israel must be eliminated, and given the immense scale of suffering in Gaza, there must be an immediate ceasefire for at least the next 6 weeks, which is what is currently on the table, Harris said Sunday in Selma, Alabama. Harris made her appearance at the Edmund Pettus Bridge for a speech on the anniversary of Bloody Sunday. Now, Kamala said this will get the hostages out and a significant amount of aid in. This would allow us to build something more enduring to ensure Israel is secure and to respect the right of the Palestinian people to dignity and freedom and self-determination. See, this is what I don't understand about the progressives and whoever else is mad at Joe Biden. Joe Biden was largely responsible for the 2 ceasefires previously and getting Palestinian folks out of there. He was also responsible for getting aid in there and the recent airdrops. That was Joe Biden. And now Kamala Harris is coming out and asking for a full ceasefire. As I understand it, the Republicans seem to be Republicans. That's a Freudian slip. The Israelis seem to be on board with it. They seem to be ready to do it, and they're still waiting to hear from Hamas. I got to think Hamas is going to jump all over this because they're the ones that wanted the ceasefire. Now, if they get a 6-week ceasefire and they start helping the people in Gaza and getting them out of there or getting them aid, I don't know what more you can expect the Biden administration to do. Now, Harris's remarks followed President Joe Biden's recently watered down optimism for the 6-week ceasefire, as well as his Friday approval of sending humanitarian aid to Gaza earlier this week. A White House official said that Israelis have more or less accepted the ceasefire proposal, which both Israel and Hamas militants would need to agree to. Harris's push for the ceasefire also comes days after Israel Defense Forces killed more than 100 people and injured more than 750 others who gathered outside of a food aid trucks for food. They said they thought they were threatened, and these poor people that are starving were just trying to get food. And there was some, you can imagine the excitement and the desperation needed to get more food. But still, the IDF saw this as something that was aggressive, and they just shot a bunch of people, unarmed people. Now, the Israeli government must do more to significantly increase the flow of aid. No excuses, Harris said. You got to understand that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are really kind of holding Netanyahu's feet to the fire. Some of the people on the left seem to think that he has more power than he does, that he can just go over there, put his hands on his hips, and tell them to stop. He can't do that. That's not going to happen. Joe Biden can do what he can do, and he's doing everything he can, as best I can see. You can try to blame Joe Biden, but Joe Biden didn't start this war. This is a conflict that's been going on intermittently for decades, well before Joe Biden was even in politics. So to blame him for what's going on there is a little bit of a stretch. Now, as Joe Biden said on Friday, the United States is committed to urgently get more life saving assistance to innocent Palestinians in need. That's Joe Biden. You don't like Joe Biden, so you're thinking maybe I'll vote Republican. What are the Republicans doing? They're blocking aid to Ukraine and Israel. They're blocking it. But you're mad at Joe. I don't, like I say, I don't know what more you want him to do. He's doing everything he can. He has every motivation to get this fucking thing ended as soon as possible. Now, yesterday, the Department of Defense carried out its first airdrop of humanitarian assistance, and the United States will continue these airdrops, and we will work on a new route by sea to deliver aid, she added. The current conflict most recently stems from Hamas's attack on October 7th in Israel, where a Palestinian militant group killed 1,200 people and took approximately 250 others hostage. But, of course, tensions between Israel and Gaza, as well as Israel's atrocities against the people in the region, began much further back. Israel has killed more than 30,000 people and injured more than 71,000 others in Gaza, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. Many more are facing starvation. See, that's the thing. I don't get involved in this argument because I don't have a side. I see problems on both sides. Hamas started this shit on this particular conflict, and they're a terrorist organization. They should be wiped out. Israel, on the other hand, is killing a lot of people, and many of them innocent. That is a problem. It's hard to pick a side when all that's really happening is innocent people are dying. As I've said before, the only side I have here is for those innocent people. And whether you're Israeli or Hamas killing innocent people, fuck you. Now, Vice President Harris's push for a temporary ceasefire, or what the administration used to call a humanitarian pause, is half a step forward, if not now, National spokesperson Eva Borgwart said in a statement emailed to Huffington Post. If not now is the publication. It's an organization and movement working to stop the U.S.'s support of Israel's apartheid system and to ensure the welfare of all Palestinians and Israelis. It makes the ongoing weapons transfers to Israel that much more indefensible. Now, true peace requires the Biden-Harris administration to halt weapon transfer, demand Israel's withdrawal from Gaza alongside a full hostage exchange, and lay out a timetable for Israel to end its apartheid ruled over Palestinians. And I get that, and that makes a certain amount of sense. But you see where the problem is here. If Israel backs off, since Hamas was the one that attacked them, who's to say they won't do it again and kill another 1,200 people? It's a tough situation. There are no easy answers, and it's not mine to answer. That's why I don't. All I'm saying is let's just stop the fucking war. Let's do some diplomacy here and get this fucking thing figured out. We got enough problems in this country that I'm truly worried about. And I'm not saying I'm not worried or saddened by the people that are being killed there. But you have to understand, if you're talking about genocide and this kind of violence, this is happening all over the world in other places we don't hear about. This is happening a lot of places. And we have to address all those places. And we have to address Israel and Hamas. As I've said, this is a conflict that's been started up intermittently so many times over the last several decades. They've never found an answer to it as yet. And to suggest that if Joe Biden doesn't find an answer, he's at fault, that's ridiculous. No other president has been able to come up with a permanent answer. They've all come up with temporary answers to work this out. And that's what we have to do. This is a tough situation for the Biden administration and for America generally. We got to get it figured out. And I'm glad Joe Biden, somebody who's got the experience and the knowledge and the compassion to fucking do something, is there to help work this out, as opposed to a dipshit like Donald Trump that would do nothing more than inflame this shit. Anyhow, Donald Trump was warned by a former federal prosecutor on Sunday. You'll like this story. If he fails to post a bond or pay the full amount owed to E. Jean Carroll, the columnist's attorneys can get to work on collecting the judgment of defamation after this week. 1 week from now, they can go after the money. They can go after bank accounts. They can go after property. They can go after whatever the fuck they want, unless Donald Trump posts an $83 million bond. And then a week or two after that, he's got to find $465 million to post in order to appeal that case. Donald Trump is a broke ass motherfucker. He ain't going to have the money. So this is when things are going to start falling apart for Donald Trump. When he starts having his shit liquidated, his plane, his cars, his bank accounts, his buildings, when they start taking that shit away, that's when it's going to hit home to Donald Trump. It'll be like the loss in D.C. in the primary election, except bigger, because Donald Trump identifies as a wealthy, powerful property owner. When that gets taken away from him, there's nothing left of Donald Trump. Donald Trump will be exposed for the broke ass loser he is. And worse than that, Donald Trump won't be able to argue the fact. That's when he's going to be painted into a corner and he's going to be fucking flailing. So Trump lost 2 defamation trials against Carroll, with the jury finding him liable in the first for sexually assaulting her. He was ordered to pay $5 million in the first trial, which he did. And he didn't get a bond for it because he couldn't find anybody to give him a bond. Now, if he just shut up, he wouldn't have had the second defamation case, but Donald Trump could not do that. Just let Donald Trump talk. He'll fuck himself over every time, and he did, to the tune of $83 million. And E. Jean Carroll's lawyers are saying, we need to get this done this week, or next week we're going to come get you shit. That's going to be a bad week for Donald Trump. MSNBC legal analyst Joyce Vance wrote Sunday evening that the former president is facing a critical deadline in that case this coming week. Now, in a post on Substack, Vance said, it's not all good news for Trump this week. That's because Trump has to post a bond in the E. Jean Carroll case by next weekend, or Carroll can begin collecting her $83 million judgment against him, the legal expert wrote. This is commonly referred to as an appeal bond. Now, she continued, if Trump manages to either get a bond or pay the full amount of the judgment into a court account, then Carroll cannot begin efforts to collect while the appeal is pending. If he fails to do so, her lawyer, Roberta Kaplan, can get to work. And this is how it's going to go down with the other one, too. He's going to have a couple of weeks from now where he's going to have to put up the $465 million. So 83 and 465, we're now putting him at about what, 540, headed up towards $600 million. going up every day to the tune of what, $114,000 of interest every day. That's like $3 million a month. This is not good for Donnie, just not good. Now, of course, Donald also offered to bargain with the court over the amount of the bond he'd have to post, asking for a substantially reduced bond. I'll give you 100 million, or I'll give you 10 million. And Donald Trump's lawyer wrote, "This isn't how it works." The court smacked down his request promptly, writing, "The court declines to grant any stay, much less an unsecured stay, without first having afforded plaintiff a meaningful opportunity to be heard." So Donald Trump has no way out. Can he come up with the 83 million to post by this week? Maybe. Maybe he can. But see, the thing is, Donald Trump doesn't like paying for things. He may have deep pockets, but he's got tiny pockets. He can't fit his hand in there. It just kills him to pull that money out and put it up and lose it, because he most certainly will lose it. They might appeal it, but he's going to lose. He's definitely going to lose. And once that money is out of his pocket, if he even has it, and it's sitting in that bond, he might as well count it gone, because his track record on appeals has not been very good as of late. Now, in addition to all the other problems, it seems like Donnie is slipping into dementia, and experts in the field are unable to sound their alarm for fear of their jobs, according to one psychologist. Now, Trump on Saturday headlined multiple rallies where he made numerous verbal slips. In one case, the former president appeared to say, Venezuela, we're gonna. One psychologist would say that his speech mishaps were consistent with a diagnosis of dementia. Another psychologist, John Gartner, PhD, has been issuing similar warnings. He appeared on a podcast on Saturday in which he says he has spoken with experts who are unwilling to be quoted, but believe the former president is suffering severe cognitive issues. Why won't they talk? Well, because they're afraid of getting death threats and people stalking them and trying to attack them. That's just how Donald Trump does fucking business. Now, Gartner said Trump is displaying a lot of clinical symptoms of a dementia-related disorder, while President Joe Biden has merely mixed up names and mixed up dates. The kind of memory problems Trump is having are clear signs of dementia, the expert said, as opposed to messing up names and dates. He said he is flubbing on people and generations. Trump actually, on some days, thinks he's running against Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama. He's actually confusing people. He's not confusing names. When asked if he believes Trump's claim that he was being sarcastic or joking when he confused Obama for Biden, something he did again on Saturday, Gartner said, not in the least. He's told that lie 1,000 times, he added, saying he's joking is the way he covers up for his cognitive decline. He doesn't look like he's joking, he said. He shows no awareness. That's part of the syndrome. Now, Gartner also claimed his analysis based on a baseline of how Trump used to behave, saying that now Trump has an impoverished vocabulary. The neurological smoking gun, he said, is the phonemic paraphasia Trump experiences. That's a big word. Don't know what it means. Experts I've talked to said nobody without a brain damage experiences this, he said, noting that Trump is unable to get to the stem of the real word, but he can get to the stem of the real word, but he's unable to complete the real word. When this happens to Trump, the expert said, you can literally see the lights are out. Someone has pulled the plug. Gartner is also the organizer of a petition for experts to diagnose Trump with dementia. This is what I mean. They're taking all his money. He's going on trial in March 25th. The stress and the strain is clearly getting to him. You can see his decline when he's on stage get worse and worse every day. Now, keep in mind what we're like 8 months away from the election. What's going to happen between now and the election, or even the RNC convention? What's going to happen between then and now? Well, we've got the criminal trial. We've got the money being pulled away. We've got the constant evidence and sitting in court and doing all these things. When this court case starts in March 25th, he's going to have to sit there every day. This motherfucker is going to have trouble doing that. He won't be able to do it. He won't be able to sit still, but he has no choice. It's going to drive him nuts. It's going to make him go deeper into this dementia. And if you're worried about him talking shit like he did in the civil cases, much different circumstance here. Criminal cases, in civil cases, the real punishment is money. So that's why they fined him or were a little easier on him. But criminal cases aren't the same. If somebody has outburst or does crazy things in court, the first thing judges go to is jail. So Donald Trump won't get a million opportunities. He won't get fined. They'll just say, you can't do this in front of the jury. You're going to fucking jail. That's what's going to happen. I don't know if Donald Trump realizes that yet, but that's the situation he's going to be in. So, no good news for Donald Trump over the next couple of weeks. Frankly, he's got no good news coming for the next 7, 8 months. And then if he is the nominee, he will most certainly lose. And then the wheels come off, and the Republicans have to decide what they're going to do at that point. All right. We are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.